I'm very happy to welcome Kalra, founder and group executive chairman, MakeMyTrip, and Stephan Ekbergh, CEO, Travelstart. And we're going to travel from India to Africa. Hey Deep, hey Stephan. Good to have you hanging out next to me here on the big panels. So Deep, I'm going to start with you, and you are in
cool.
You are in Europe on a business trip. Are you in the same place as Greg?
I'm actually back in India now. So I was in Europe. I was not on a business trip. So let me allay all your curiosity. I was there to visit my son, who's based in Zurich, and me and my wife, we did a workcation out of Zurich. So no business, all work, all fun.
Well, that's wonderful that you are, traveling and in Europe on a VFR, as they would say, and that seems to be the segment that's really coming back strong. So, Stephan, this has been a time for companies to actually start new businesses as well, and I believe that you've started something called Day One, which you have been working on. And what's the trend that you're betting on with Day One?
First of all, thanks for having me. So great to be back. Can't believe it's 2 years ago. We had such a good time, always these conferences. I love them. And but let me tell you a little bit. So we've been busy with a whole bunch of various projects, and a few of them we haven't even launched yet. But the one that we did launch was Day One. And what I noticed was that obviously there wasn't much business going on, but we had a lot of expats actually coming down to do remote work from Cape Town. And I talked to some of them, and obviously we found out what grievance they were going through and the hassle, of setting up a new life here for 3 to 6 months. And so I talked to some colleagues. I said, you know what, let's just do this sort of part immigration in a box and make it easy for people to come down and work here for 3 to 6 months, because I know what's going to happen is that at least 10% of them are probably going to come back again. They're going to buy property. Eventually they're going to start to invest here. So this is part of it. This is one puzzle piece in a larger thing we're trying to solve here of getting more investments into South Africa. So it's like a puzzle piece in all these things that we're doing.
Okay, that's exciting. So you feel that remote working, and Deep, I don't know if you see that same trend in India. This remote working, this seems to be quite a big trend that's happening across Asia, Japan. We talked about it as well.
Yeah, Siew, we obviously didn't have a choice for a while. We had a national lockdown for a couple of months from end March till end May in 2020, and there was no option but to work from home. I think that kind of unlocked the way people were thinking about working remotely. And, 1.5 years of doing a bit of that, going back to office, we're back in office about 20% people. Only people who are double vaccinated, and we do some random kind of rapid tests every day for about 10% of the people coming in. And, knock on wood, so far so good. But I think this bit about working from home, working remotely, and thanks to platforms like the one we're using right now, I always shudder to think if this pandemic happened, say 5 years ago, when really video conferencing wasn't that easy, and especially multiple people video conferencing, I think businesses would have had a much tougher time. So what this has done, at least to our people, is given them the kind of belief and confidence that we can do a kind of hybrid version. So as of now, unless you've got a cabin at work, we're saying come in 2 days a week or 3 days a week, but not every day. And we want people to come in by rotation, feel comfortable. And people are finding that if you have a kind of what I call tag team, so you have your leader in office, you have your manager in office, but some of you are sometimes in office and sometimes at home, the productivity has actually gone up. Initially, we went through a period where there was hyper productivity because there was so much to be done. And people were trying to compensate for the fact that we aren't there. So the fact that you can work seamlessly from home, keep up with projects. And then you went through the fatigue period where I think there was burnout and people were just tired of working from home. Decorum and discipline took a beating. And I think we settled at about 70-75% productivity on the average. Now, with people coming in once, twice, or thrice a week, I think that productivity is going up again. So I do believe that going forward, we're going to have a hybrid kind of version where a lot of people now will say, listen, let me work half the time from office and half the time from home. These are people who can be in the same city as where office is. Okay. And then there'll be people who are living remotely and say, okay, let's have a conversation. What if I continue to work remotely, but I come in, for 4 weeks every 12 weeks? And we're going to see all of that happen. I think it might end up being a very interesting new work structure. Nothing, I'm not suggesting this is the right thing to do. I'm just saying this might be the new norm, and companies and employees have to get comfortable with it. And companies have to say, okay, how can I make this work? Is there a win-win? Will people take a cut in salary if they're not living in a big city, but living in a remote part of the country? Will they actually take a cut in salary? And will people who come in a couple of times also take a break so companies can actually save on office space, which has become very expensive? So right. I think it's going to be quite fascinating. We're all experimenting. Well, I think we've got to find the new norm, which is comfortable.
It's clearly a trend that Stephan is betting on, and so out of the greatest disruption comes innovation, right? But the thing is, like, you both have been involved in online travel since the beginning of time, and you've seen a lot, you've seen a lot through those years. Do you think this period is more about evolution or revolution? So how is this period different in terms of innovation? And Stephan, I go to you.
Look, I think you can call it probably what you want. I think, though, that much like Deep is saying, I do think that people's behaviors will be changed forever, at least for the next 10, 20 years. And I'm not even sure that we've seen the end of this yet. So, but fact of the matter is, we know that people will always want to travel, so that's a good thing. I know from experience that any kind of restriction in travel will always slow down, the amount of people traveling. So, whether it's, visa requirements, whether it's the currency going bonkers and it's becoming too expensive to go to a certain destination, or if there is, a conflict of some sort, war, even vaccine requirements. So all this has a negative effect on travel. And I think that while we're all super happy now that things will go back to normal, I think that the normal will just be a little bit different. Now, if you want to call that evolution or revolution, the thing is that normally, as you come out of these things, you don't see immediately what the new will be, and I for sure have no idea.
All right.
But one thing is very sure, though, over the next couple of years there will be a lot of M&A. That's for sure, though.
Exactly. I mean, so it was interesting hearing what Greg was speaking, right? And I think we had James Liang yesterday too, in a way, right, talking about revenge investments, when travel comes back. Now, Deep, I go to you with something specific, like MakeMyTrip. You made a good exit with Exego, right? Your initial investment was 4.8 million. And it is reported in the media that you made an 8 times return, which is really good. So what do you think Alok and his team got right with Exego?
Yeah, I think that worked out well. Full credit to the Exego team. I think Alok and Rajneesh, the co-founder, they are fundamentally a product-driven company. I think they've been fundamentally very innovative. They've actually been trying a lot of different business models. So we've been their first backers, and we saw them through a lot of trials and tribulations where they tried a bunch of stuff. Some worked, some didn't. I think the USP really is their ability to junk that and try something new. So they didn't completely give up. They didn't get demoralized. They said, okay, this is not working. Let's see what part of it worked, and which is classic product and A/B testing, and let's try something else. And they kept their ear to the ground. So yeah, I think that worked for them. And then they finally found something, which worked. They started off being a meta company, a meta search company, the Kayak of India. That didn't work for various reasons. And then they tried something else. And finally, they found joy in rail and train tickets and other stuff. So I think that's really the big learning for all startups out there, that be fixated on your end goal, which should be building a great company and a great brand, but don't be so fixated and stubborn about your business idea. That can change. So be open to pivoting, be open, just be nimble if you have to change. So I think there's a value in being steadfast and even stubborn, right. But it's about what you're steadfast. That's
so it's interesting that two of you are in markets where Yeoh, we had the CEO of Yeoh who flew to Singapore for this conference, Jong Yoon, who basically, when we asked him the markets he was interested in, I mean, he's made an acquisition in India, and the market that he's interested in is Africa, like a market of promise. So what excites you about the future of travel in India? Can you give me just two factors, Deep? What excites you about the future of travel in India?
Yeah, absolutely, Siew. But I do want to put on record that you promised to get me out there in Singapore and you didn't. So I wanted to be there in person.
It wasn't up to me, Deep. If it were up to me,
I know it was very hard for Indians to. Okay, so I think if there are two things, the first is the pandemic has fundamentally accelerated the number of people who are buying online. So the reported numbers are that pre-pandemic, we had 110 million people buying online of the 500 million people who were online in India. That number now is anywhere between 220, double, or 250 million, which is the entire population of the US pretty much. So I think that's the most exciting part, where we've just created a double market who's buying online, comfortable buying online. And there were many hesitations about buying online. People were still going offline. India's a developing country. So that's number one. We just doubled the market in the pandemic. Obviously, travel did gain, but if you've been following India, you know the markets are on fire, and anything online and anything tech has been going through the roof. So I think that's super exciting. I think the second one is probably the mainstreaming of alternate accommodations, as we call, so homestays. That's something which people seeked out the most during the pandemic. It's become mainstream now, so which wasn't the case in India. We'd been pushing it for a while, and people were still looking at it as a corner case, or certain kind of people were looking at it. Now, guess what? People are either looking at high-end resorts, if they can afford them. They've definitely moved up. If I can just steal one more idea, so is going up market. So people have saved a lot of money because they haven't been traveling, and now they're saying, we can afford a resort where we'll be more spread out with more space, etc. It feels safer, and they're taking all the precautions. We've seen a distinct shift up. So these three things clearly.
All right. He snuck in one more than I gave him permission to. Stephan, what about you? Give me two things that excites you about the future of travel in Africa.
Okay, so I think one of them is that obviously, people stay a lot more at home here, so they travel more locally, and so I think we've actually that's kept us alive here, during this whole period here, and I think that will stay because the money stays within the ecosystem here instead of going to Europe and other places. So and Africa is an incredible continent with some of the most spectacular stuff that you can experience ever, and so we're very excited and bullish about Africa as a destination. We see that people in Africa, they travel within Africa, and the money stays within there, and there is a lot of investments going into that space. So I would say that that's the one thing. If you ask me to come up with two more things, I think the fact that it's very complex, I think we like that, because that makes it harder for competition to come in here. So those are the things that I would say that we're quite excited about.
All right. Deep, the big news from India is Tata Group buying Air India. How does that change the game if it does?
Yeah, it's a huge game changer. As you would know, Siew, and a lot of people, again, who are aware of what's happening in India, Air India, our national carrier, was not being as competitive as it should have been over the last maybe decade or more. At one point of time, this airline was actually considered among the finest airlines in the world. It was privately held, ironically, by the Tatas. So really, the founder, J.R.D. Tata, used to run it very passionately. And I think it's the kind of business, like most consumer businesses, which are not best run with the government. So I think the privatization, and most importantly, the 100% privatization, that's why the first time around it didn't work, because the government was ready to let go 74%, but most people wanted complete control. And I think it's gone to the best home possible. The Tatas are the most respected corporate name probably in all of India and have been forever. And they're very, very, focused on travel and hospitality. They also own or part own majority stakes in Vistara, very exciting airline, AirAsia India. And then, of course, the largest hotel chain in the country, the Taj Hotels, is owned by them. So it's I think in the right place. It's going to be fantastic to see a well-capitalized airline, which has the most important thing that an airline needs in India today, which is bilaterals and routes. So Air India can fly pretty much all over the world because it got the bilaterals, which is the biggest value. It has a big fleet. I think it's going to be a game changer. So exciting times up ahead. I think really good, strong competitor in the airline space is something that we welcome. I think it's great for the country. It's great for competition too.
Right, Stephan, I know you're both invested in and you're committed to startups. And in fact, part of your day one ecosystem, I mean, like you're thinking about building like a investment ecosystem to really champion travel startups or startups across the board in Africa. So what kind of startups are you most excited about right now? Is there any area of tech or sector that you are keen on?
I'll tell you, I think everything is interesting here. And obviously we have, all the traditional, industries that still needs to be digitized. So we're super interested in looking at that. And but I think for me personally, it's mainly sort of very large project that we think can transform, especially the Western Cape where we live, in the education sector, job, creation, agriculture, stuff like that. So anything where technology will sort of transform an industry, and so that's what I'm really looking at. And then my little mistress here is talent management, which I'm super passionate about, which I've spent quite a lot of time on. So yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so we asked the question, is home enough? So Deep, MakeMyTrip is now in Middle East. Any other markets you're eyeing?
Nothing that I can actually share right now, but we think India is huge. Like I just mentioned, we doubled the market size, the relevant market size. Middle East, we went for a very specific reason. In fact, we are in the entire GCC with an Arabic offering. We got a lot of natural traffic from there. And it's largely because of the Indian diaspora that's there, who was comfortable with the brand. They had traveled there or they lived there. So many people actually, have dual homes, and it's just 3 hours away from most parts of India. So it's actually very close to get to Dubai and places like that. And there's a very big Indian diaspora. So I think we're responding to that and saying, okay, let's build for this. Let's build an Arabic site, and everything started following. And yeah, the initial results are pretty good, despite it being pandemic time. That is a market, particularly the UAE, that seems to have managed the pandemic pretty well. 80% vaccination now, which is really good. So I think we will look at similar markets, but I think India is big enough for us right now.
Okay, and Stephan, I mean, Travelstart, you went into Middle East. Have you pulled out of the market now, and are you focusing on Africa?
Look, we had to make some trade-offs here because of this period we've gone through over the last year and a half. With limited amount of cash, we just had to focus. So I wouldn't say yes or no. We haven't pulled out completely. We're not as active as we were before. Will that change? maybe not. Can't really tell you too much about it because it all depends on market conditions. And we're focusing. I mean, we're committed to Africa primarily, and we're not making any big changes on our sort of Middle East portfolio. So it's not a yes, it's not a no. It's as is.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to wrap up with 2 questions, rapid fire. How do you think you'll get your 15 minutes of fame, other than speaking at WiT, deep?
I think by continuing to be nice to you and having you at WiT, that's where I get my 15 minutes of fame every year. Thank you.
All right. Stephan?
If I Google my own name, there is so much stuff about me with pictures and stuff like that. So I'm fine. I'd be happy if I don't get any more.
Okay, so our theme is Travel.O to Infinity.O. What does Infinity look like to you, Deep?
Much closer now. It's something like a tangible dream. I do believe travel's coming back, probably the most resurgent industry possible, revenge, resurgence, whatever we want to call it. And for us, very tangibly so, I think, is if every customer could end up being a brand ambassador, then we are there. So I think we're well on the way. And for all you know, this really tough time might have been the best thing for many companies, particularly if you're a market leader. And I think if you've kind of used the time well, it might end up being the best time when we look back in 2025 and we'll say, you know what, we came back much stronger. So quite excited about that.
All right, Stephan?
I'm not so sure, though, that the poor people would agree on that, Deep, but that's a different discussion. But anyway, I would say for me, what Infinity looks like, that's like a steady stream of beautiful, constant cash flow. That's what I want to see.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for joining. It would not be the same WiT experience without you two, because you've been with me at WiT since the beginning of time, since the beginning of your journey. So I absolutely just had to close, the conversations with the two of you. And next year, Deep, Stephan, we have to have you back here if I'm still around. Thank you, both of you. Thank you for joining us.
Love you. Thanks a lot.